Today we're going to work on how to applique shapes onto different layers of fabric. So here's our ugly doll that we're going to be working on. Yours, of course, will look different than mine. And this is sort of how it's made up. So there's a back of the fabric, there's a back fabric, a front fabric, and then we have the appliques, or the shapes that we are going to stitch to the front fabric. So the first thing you're going to do is actually take the back piece of fabric and set it aside. We're not going to use that right now. The next thing we're going to do is you need a glue stick. This is the easiest way to apply things without pins. And you're just going to literally glue, just like you do with paper, glue the back of the shape that you want to stitch onto your fabric, and put it in place. Okay, and then when we go to thread our needle, we're going to use actually embroidery floss to stitch our shape on. Embroidery floss is actually made out of 6 strands of thread. And so if you kind of go like this and fluff up the end, you can see each of the threads, the strands that are making up this 6-strand floss. So what we're going to do is work with 2 strands. So what you do is you separate 2 strands away from the group, and then you slowly kind of untwist, pull straight up with the strands you're trying to separate. You untwist and pull. It helps if you sort of hold down this other, it's almost a 3-hand job here. You sort of hold the tail straight that is full of 6 strands, and then you just pull. So now we set those other 4 strands aside. We have 2 strands now. And we're going to thread our needle. Same as before, you hold the tails of the thread very close between your 2 fingers in your less dominant hand. And with your dominant hand, you're going to hold the eye of the needle and just put it near the ends, and then slowly unpinch your fingers. And that should, okay. If your ends kind of do that to you, then they need, I call it a haircut, but you just trim just those very fuzzy ends off and try again. Just unpinch your fingers as you press the eye down. You can take your fingernail and kind of smooth out the bubbles in the thread. So here's the point where you can make a decision. You will either make the tails close to being even and then tie your knot, or what I like to do is just use one tail. So you kind of have what I call a necktie sticking out of your eye of your needle. So one side of your thread is shorter than the other. So this set is, I don't know, about 1/3 of the length of the entire string. So then I'm just going to hold the one tail and do the knot method that we did before. And then this time you pull through and you have a knot on just the one tail, and the other tail is your necktie. And you just make sure when you're holding your needle, you then grab those threads just below the eye of the needle. You kind of hold them tight with your fingers, and then that way, as you're pulling your stitches through, you're not unthreading your needle as you go. Okay, so let's pretend this is the top of our ugly doll that we're going to be putting a shape on. And right now we're going to hide the knot on the back side of the fabric. So the back side of the fabric is like this. it's going to actually be inside of our ugly doll, and that's where the stuffing is going to be. So it's a perfect place to hide our knot in our tail. So we're just going to come through. Let's do the whip stitch first. So this is what the whip stitch looks like on the edge of fabric. So this is the edge of it if we're just doing it on the edge. But if we want to add it to something where both of the edges are not lined up the same, and then this is how we do that. So we're going to pull our needle through the fabric, through both layers of fabric, and leave our tail on the other side. And I always like to hold my tail out of the way and kind of hold it down so that it doesn't get tangled in the first few stitches. So then what we're going to do is, instead of going around and around like we did the edges on this one, we're going to only go around the green. So we're going to go off the edge of the green right onto the edge of that fabric and put our needle down just through the main fabric. Okay, and so that's what it looks like. And then you're coming back through both layers. Okay, and now on, and then this, okay, to kind of keep this out of your way, I just like to kind of scrunch it and get it out of your way, and that way you can hold just the piece that you're working on. So now I'm going to make another stitch on the whip stitch here. So near the edge of the applique fabric, and then off the edge of the applique fabric through both layers. Okay, so near the edge, off the edge. And honestly, once you get the rhythm down, you don't even have to go on the front and the back with your hand. You can stay on the top. So you go near the edge and then off the edge, and then kind of pinch it so that you're going through both layers and up. And so this is where the whip stitch becomes pretty speedy. So you're still going through both layers, but you're just staying on the top, and you're kind of letting your needle go where it needs to go without looking too hard. Okay, now I'm going to actually show you how to move into a different stitch from here. Let's say I want to change stitches. Maybe this is a different shape that I'm trying to do. So what I'm going to do now is, if I want to do the back stitch, I'm going to draw a line that I need to, let's say I'm going to put a smiley face on this heart. I'm going to draw the line where I want it to be. I like to use these friction pens because they erase with heat, so I can run my warm iron over this and then the line will disappear. So even if you don't draw it perfectly, it'll still erase later. So same thing, if I'm only going just a little space, I don't have to stop, tie a knot, and start again. I can just sneak over to the next spot with my needle. And the main thing you want to do here, back stitch, is we skip a stitch. So we got to make sure and leave a little bit of space for our skipped stitch. You just want to make sure not to pull too tight when you go to the next stitch. Leave enough so that it's straight, but not too tight. Okay, so we're going to go one stitch back, skip forward one stitch. Okay, go to the back, go back one to the beginning of the last stitch. Okay, forward one, skip one. That's how you do the back stitch through these different layers. Let's say I have my my ugly doll already stuffed and I want to put a smiley face on. What I could do then, I'm just going to actually, okay, what I could do then, what if I want both layers and I don't actually want my needle to go through the back side because I have stuffing there? So what you can do is you can hide your knot as best you can underneath the applique piece, so that in this project, that's that green piece that we're adding. So what I would do is, I have my knot tied. I'm going to actually sneak my needle in here between two stitches, kind of wiggle it so you're not catching fabric, but you're going between 2 stitches. And then you come out where you want your first stitch. And so I can trim this tail so that it's not visible on the top, but also I didn't have to go through all the layers of fabric to get that knot secured. So now, instead of going straight down with my needle, see how you would go through all the layers, I actually want to go at kind of an angle across. So I just want to make sure I'm catching the green fabric is all I'm trying to do. Just want to stay on that top applique fabric. And if you'll see, I'm not catching the blue. I'm not catching that 3rd layer of fabric, but also if you don't see your needle through this fabric, you're not catching, your thread won't show either. So I am only catching a stitch on the top piece of fabric. So go in at an angle. You want the tip of your needle to be where you want your stitch to go. So we're going to go to the beginning of that previous stitch with our sharp end of our needle, and then you sort of scoot across. You kind of feel underneath the fabric with your needle. Okay, so you find the spot with your needle and then you scoot across. So now, how do I tie off and hide my tail at this point too? So let's say I finished my smile here. A couple more stitches. How do you hide that knot without, if you're on the top of the fabric, how do you knot that piece and not let it show? So what I would do is I would push my needle through the applique piece, so the top layer, and then I would peek inside if I can to make sure I'm only going through the paint, the top layer of fabric. And then I just grab the tiniest bit of fabric here with a little bite of my needle, and then I do the loop-de-loop method of tying it. So let my first loop close, put it through my second loop, and then let that one close, and then trim it. So now how do we do the blanket stitch on the top side of a fabric? Same thing, we're going to knot our needle. Make sure you're holding on to your necktie here so that it's not unthreading, so make sure and hold your threads. I'm going to set this back piece aside again, and we're going to be just working on the top layer with our applique. So remember, if I'm right-handed, I like to go this way around, and if I'm left-handed, I like to go this way around. So since I'm right-handed, I'm going to actually turn my work this way and come up here with my first stitch. So I'm going to hide the knot on the back, come up through both layers, and then off the edge of the applique one more time. This time I'm going to go near the edge and then down through the green fabric. So see that? Come up on the edge and inside. Okay. So now I come from underneath just through the pink layer near the edge of the green layer, and now after I've done my anchor stitch on the very first stitch we do is the anchor stitch, and then I'm going to go under, go through both layers, and then now you're going to go over the next stitch, and this is where you're going to pull your thread through the loop that you made. That's how we make the blanket stitch. I actually like to do it just poking down through near the edge of the applique and then up through at the end of the applique there. I just feel like staying on the top of the fabric rather than flipping it back and forth. It just gives you more control. So near the edge, and come up through off the edge. So near the edge, come up off the edge. Near the edge, off the edge. That one's a little long. You want to try and keep them the same distance lengthwise and across. Okay, so that's how you do the blanket stitch on the edge of an applique. What happens if I reach a corner like right here? How do I turn my corner as I'm going around? So you sort of need to eyeball your straight stitches here, need to kind of get a little bit closer together, sort of like you're turning like a wide, if you're pulling a trailer, you kind of have to assume and go closer and let the wide part turn out wider. My stitches are getting longer as I go. You have to be careful of that. See there, I just didn't hold on to my necktie, so I need to rethread my needle. So if that happens, you just rethread your needle. And one reason why I like holding my thread like this as opposed to tying both tails together is if I do mess up and I need to take out a stitch, I just use the eye of my needle and I pull on that loop and I can go backwards and I don't have to cut my thread and start again. Like that. So I can just rethread. Oops. Okay. And go again. So here I've got my corner I'm approaching. So I'm going to do one at the center. And you just go around. Those inside corners are a lot easier, fewer stitches than the outside corners are. So that's the blanket stitch on one edge, not two.